Chapter 4, 19. Mr. Ray was standing outside the funeral home sipping coffee from a bodega cup when I got there. For the most part, my suit was in still pretty good shape. No stains, all tucked in, only wrinkled on the shoulders because of my backpack straps. And if you know, I felt different in a suit. I felt like I was really going to work to do something important. Little did I know. Look at you, slick. Sharper than an ice pick, ain't ya? He said, extending his hand to me. Hey, Mr. Ray, I said, a little embarrassed, and met his hand with mine. What made you want to put on your spiffs? He joked, turning to the blue paper cup to take one last gulp of coffee. Just felt like it, I guess. I said I couldn't exactly tell him that it dawned on me that the suit would make it easier for me to sit in on more funerals because, well, anyone in a black suit could fit right into a funeral, no problem. He looked at me for a second. Well, you look good, son. Now if you can get all your little naughty head buddies around here to put on some decent clothes and pick their pants up their asses, well, we'll really be in business. Pants so low they gotta walk like cowboys, like they rode here from Bronx on a horse. I snickered. I couldn't help it that it was a good one. Plus, it reminded me of something my mother used to say. She used to call the boys from the neighborhood ghetto penguins because they waddled. They ain't my buddies, I told him. The whole pants sagging thing was never really my style. It just seemed like weird to have your whole butt showing like that. Mr. Ray nodded. I know, Matt, he said, tossing his cup to the trash. He looked over to my shoulder at a car pulling up behind me. I turned and there was a black Cadillac easing almost to a bumper of Mr. Ray's car. It had dark windows and a neon pink paper hanging from the rear view mirror. I recognized the driver. Robbie Ray? I could almost smell the hair grease, his oversized dark sunglasses. I made him look like some kind of bug. There was a man in the passenger seat, but it didn't know him. But seriously, son, all jokes aside, I'm glad you wore a suit today because I need you. For what? I said, edgy-like, because all I could think about was how I said I didn't want to touch the bodies. You know what a pallbearer is? Nah, never heard of it. Behind me, the pop and the squeal of the car doors opening. Any sign of cork, Willie? Robbie Ray asked from the car. Mr. Ray looked at his brother and twisted his mouth up in a sarcastic way, making it clear that Robbie's question was a dumb one. Well, what about the kid? He gonna do it? Robbie Ray asked in a voice concerned again and impatient. Since I was the only kid around, I figured he was talking about me. I also didn't know what it was, but sort of putting two to two together, I guessed it had something to do with whatever Paul Bear was. Mr. Ray narrowed his eyes at his brother. Give me a second, he said to Robbie in a serious tone. Robbie Ray nodded his head nervous and ducked back into the car. Sorry about that, Matthew, Mr. Ray said, tapping a box of cigarettes against his palm. But like I'm saying, pallbearers are the guys who pretty much carry the casket. I just gaped at him, and my heart dropped to my knees, he continued. I mean, sometimes family members do it, but a lot of times funeral homes do it. Usually we have enough guys, but nobody can find cork. Yeah, he's probably getting out with my father smashed. I thought, so, Mr. Ray said inside, you're pretty much all we got. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't say no. I mean, I could have, but then I might not be able to go to the funeral, which was the whole point of me wearing the suit. But I wasn't sure I wanted to say yes either. I'd never carried a casket. What if it was too heavy? What if it smelled weird? Like dead people or something? Were there special ways to do it? Would I be able to learn to do it on the car ride over? What if I dropped it? All these things were flashing through my head as Mr. A waited for an answer. I could feel the wet nastiness start to develop under my arms. The nerves kicked into superdrive. So what you think? He asked. A manly version of the whole puppy dog thing? I just nodded my head. Damn. You know where you're going, Mr. Ray said. He was talking to his brother on his phone, but using a headset like the ones they use when they take orders at Cluck Bucket. I thought about maybe suggesting earbuds, but Mr. Ray seemed too old to switch it up. No, Robbie, you gotta start paying attention, man. Monroe and Stuyvesant, not Madison, Monroe, he said, frustrated. He shook his head and mumbled something to himself. I looked out the window of my neighborhood as the guy's radio complained about the New York Giants. Staring at the stoop after stoop, I thought about my mother. I can't really say that I was thinking about exactly, just everything, just her. It's crazy to believe you can always put words into what you think and when you think of a person who's gone, mainly because a lot of times it's not about specific things. Sometimes you just want to think about the person, how they made you feel. That's what I was daydreaming about. The way she made me feel. Like I was the luckiest kid in the world. Like I couldn't lose. Like I was somebody important. Mr. Ray didn't say much on that way, but I could tell he kept glancing over at me. I knew he knew where my head was, because right when I could feel tears creeping up, he put his hand on my shoulder. "Hey man, you alright?" he asked, his eyes off the road. I cleared up my throat. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, just trying to sound normal. "You?" And before you could say sure, he shouted, "Shit," and slammed on the brakes. Red light. He almost ran into the back of Robbie's car. A loud thump came from behind us, and I figured we must have been rear-ended, but we weren't. Mr. Ray reached his hand up to the window, and directly behind us slid open. It's funny. I didn't even realize the window completely blacked out behind my head. It was sort of like how cabs have that window separating the front seat from the back seat, except Mr. Ray cars it was tinted. Mr. Ray peered into the back of the car, and I turned my head to see what was back, and it caused a thump. I practically choked when I saw it. The casket, I thought. The casket was not in Robbie's car since he was leading the way. Even though I tried not to totally look bugged out, I couldn't help it. It's just what happens. When I'm nervous, robot face. But can you blame me? A freaking casket right behind my head? "Hey, it's okay, man," Mr. Ray said, stretching his neck to see the traffic light ahead of us. "The passenger can't feel a thing," he joked, and forced a smile. "Yeah, I guess," I replied, fixing my gaze back toward the window. The light turned green, and we were on our way to our church again. I could feel fear boiling inside of me. I tried to calm down. I thought to myself, Mr. Ray is right. The person in that casket can't feel nothing, so it won't be the end of the world if my hand slips and I drop it. No biggie, I just said, "Do over," and pick it right back up. Nobody will even care, right? Then I caught a glimpse of myself from the side of your mirror. It was me who looked dead. The funeral of Nancy and I. "You know her? You know her?" I said awkwardly to Robbie. No master at small talk or nothing, but I had enough training at home to know that you at least try to spark a conversation with people you're working with. Mr. Ray had to run into the church to talk to the pastor about bringing the casket in, and Robbie didn't seem like he was in the mood for a chit-chat, at least not with me. I figured that he was probably because he's embarrassed about Mr. Ray barking at him in the car, with him sitting right there. I guess I could understand that. "Nope," he said, swinging the back door of Mr. Ray's truck open. Looking into the trunk down the hallway, Robbie ran his hand along the casket like he was stroking the face of some pretty woman. "Ooh-wee. Yo, Benny, we got a steal and Aiden's on this one," he shouted like he was talking about a car. Benny was a regular-sized, medium skinny guy with a thick black beard that looked like a carpet covering the whole bottom half of his face. He sat on the passenger side of Robbie's car and the door open, one leg in and one leg out, puffing a cigarette. "Oh yeah," Benny said. He got out of the car and closed the door. Took one more pull from the cigarette, burning it down to the yellow part, and then plucked it into the street. "What's your guess?" Robbie hummed. "I'm going with the businesswoman, man." "Please. Businesswoman? Getting buried around here? Doubt it." "What you mean? You don't think the folks around here can be business people?" I was confused about what was going on. "Man, you know what I'm saying. It just ain't likely Miss Knight or whatever her name is, or wherever some banker down the Wall Street, you know? It. I know it, shit. Even a little man knows it." He chin pointed at me. "Well, her casket says different. Man, that casket could have been paid for by anybody. Hell, even your broke ass probably could have had a good casket just 'cause your family in the business." Benny strung Robbie with that one, but before Robbie could snap back, Mr. Ray came out of the church with two other guys dressed in black suits. "Alright, I got a few brothers from the church to help us out. That makes 6 of us, 3 on each side. Put young blood in the middle. Should be smooth." Benny and Robbie straightened up and stopped talking about the cost of Miss Knight's casket. Mr. Ray got respect. I liked that Robbie and Benny and I got on one side in the middle, and Mr. Ray and the other 2 guys took the other side. Before I knew it, the casket was coming out of the car, and I was holding tight onto the steel rails along the sides of it. My hands were slick with sweat, and all I could do was pray I didn't drop this dead lady's expensive casket. I imagined some old woman telling me my mother on me up in heaven, shaking her head, wagging her finger. Up the steps, one step at a time, Mr. Ray called out each move like a captain in the army. The other 4 guys grunted with every step, which made me think I really wasn't carrying much weight. But I wasn't about to let go and find out. Once we got inside the church, it was easy. We hauled the casket down the aisle towards the altar, and a big wooden cross hung up in the black bowl, surrounded by the usual big stained glass windows. "Okay, gents, lift on 3. Mr. Ray ordered. 1, 2, up. We hoisted the casket onto what looked like a big table. "Jesus, this thing is heavy," Mr. Ray moaned, using his handkerchief to wipe smudges off the pearl box. Yeah, it's got copper and 18 gauge, Robbie said, stepping back into the aisle, making sure it was centered on the big table. Expensive. Mr. Ray shot him a look. Don't start. He turned to me and spoke softly. These fools are always trying to guess what kind of money these folks got based on their caskets. I wanted to ask my mother if my mother's casket was heavy, but it probably wasn't. Mainly because they ignorant, he added while unlocking the first half of the casket. I took a step back, realizing he was going to open it up. I wasn't really afraid of saying anything, mainly because I had seen my mother in one, but I wasn't sure who this old lady, Miss Knight, was or what she was going to look like. I imagined she would be wrinkly, but pretty much a rich old lady kind of way. Pearls, a diamond earrings, a ring, a fancy dress, like she was taking a nap before dinner at an expensive restaurant in Manhattan or something like that. Mr. Ray clicked the last lock and lifted the lid of the casket and took a peek. I was so surprised at what she looked like. Miss Knight wasn't old at all. As a matter of fact, she was young. Sad, Mr. Ray said to me. Gone too soon. I stared at her face, smooth and round, no wrinkles, small diamond studs in her ears, a silver necklace around her neck with a little heart charm. How old was she? I asked. 19. 19? 2 years older than me, I gulped. What happened to her? Her mother said it was an asthma attack. Asthma? How could she die from asthma attack? I mean, I just never heard of anybody actually dying from that. Like, you just do a few squeezes of your inhaler and you're fine. I said, asthma? Nobody dies from asthma. Yeah, I know. The thing is, no one knew she had asthma, not even her. So Mr. Ray shrugged. No inhaler? Mr. Ray stared down at the teenager. Then he patted me on the shoulder. Helped me bring in the flowers. The funeral was way different than Miss Jameson's. It was packed with tons of teenagers, and I recognized the neighborhood, but most I had never seen before. I sat in the back as they came rolling in jeans and sneakers. Some wore t-shirts and Nancy's face printed on the front. A lot of girls came in with their hands covering their mouths, and a lot of guys would take their hats off, but wouldn't take off their sunglasses, and even though I thought it was a little rude, I got it. I stood in the back with Mr. Robbie, Ray, and Benny. I watched as everyone did the funeral march, the same kind they did at my mom's funeral. When they look at the body, say some crap about how she looked like herself. But the way teenagers looked at Nancy was different. The way old ladies looked at my mother. The young people just looked surprised. Surprised their homegirl was gone. That all of a sudden that they would never talk to Nancy on the phone again or in class. Just like it was over. I got that too. There was no choir, thank God. Just a skinny girl with braids who got up on the roof of the church and sang His Eye is on the Sparrow. And when I say sang it, I mean she sang it. She dug deep and belted out the notes strong enough to reach Nancy, I swear. Tears streamed down her face, and even though I couldn't see anybody else's face, I could tell a lot of people were crying by the way folks were thumbing corners of their eyes. I paid close attention to Nancy's mother, pretty dark-skinned woman sitting up in the front in all black. She had dreadlocks wound up in a bun, and she'd rocked back and forth while another mother wrapped her arm around her and fanned her with one of those church fans. I looked at the program. Next was the obituary. The preacher stepped up into the microphone. I'm not sure if he had a sharp suit or just jeans and a shirt because he wore a long burgundy robe, like those ones you wear when you graduate from high school. I was looking forward to wearing that same kind of robe soon. He had a baby face, but I could tell he was way older than I looked. He had creases in his forehead. He stood at the mic for a moment and began the obituary off the program. It was pretty short, I guess, because Nancy's life was only 19 years long. She barely had any time to do anything, I thought about it. If I died, my obituary would only be a few sentences. Matthew Miller was the son of Daisy Miller and Jackson Miller. His best friend was Chris Hayes, and he couldn't land a date to save his life, so he died. The end. Oh, and there was probably a picture of me on the front of the program, one of my senior pictures, robot face number 12. The pastor Reed Nancy was the oldest of two. She graduated Brooklyn Tech with honors. Her favorite subject was English. She loved poetry and music, especially R&B, but her favorite thing to do was run track. She got a full scholarship to the University of Maryland to run. She really did well her freshman year, winning her first race a few days before she died. Or the pastor read off the program. Before God called his angel back home, the preacher at my mom's funeral said the same, something like that too. I guess that's better than saying died, but still means the same thing. It doesn't really matter what you call it, still sucks. I thought about Nancy. She was a runner, a winner. She was good at school and sports. It almost never happens. And judging from all teenagers jammed to that church, stuffed in a camp van, all on top, sitting in the aisles, standing along the backside walls. She was also very popular. Nancy must have been a cool chick, but even though she could run, she couldn't run fast enough to beat death. I also couldn't help to think about her mother in the front row, heaving and rocking and occasionally lifting her hands as if begging a god some kind of help. I now knew what it was like to lose a mother, but I don't know what a mother felt if she lost me. She used to say whenever we'd hear about some kid dying on the street, parents ain't supposed to bury their kids, it just ain't right. I knew, and not just because she told me a trillion times that she loved me like crazy, that she would have been shattered, just like Nancy's mom begging for God to take her instead, crying, screaming for me to have a second shot at life. There wouldn't have been a joke in the world that would be funny enough to help her laugh it through. There would have been a joke in the world funny anymore, period. So I felt for Miss Knight. Miss Knight didn't look like she had a whole lot of money, so I could only imagine how much she spent on that heavy casket. But to her, I bet it was worth it. My mom would have done the same thing. Nancy's sister was called up to the podium after the pastor was done with his words. She looked about 16. I could tell she was cute, even though the black lines streamed down her face from all the tears mixed up with her makeup. Her hair was cut short and a little blush, almost perfectly round, and she stood at the microphone, holding a piece of paper, shaken with nerves. Her name was Alicia. This, she started, her voice vibrating like her hands. This is a poem from Nancy. Alicia, put one hand on your chest and took a deep breath. Nancy, remember when we would run and we'd see who could beat Mom? Remember when we laughed and cranked jokes all afternoon? Remember when Mom made a cake and we fought over the spoon? Remember on your birthday when I popped the best balloon? Remember staying up all night singing our favorite tune? She paused and said, I Can't Take My Eyes Off You by Lauryn Hill. Her mother, now sitting up straight, nodded. Even though I couldn't see her face, I could tell her mom was sort of smiling. Alicia went back to the poem. Remember staying up all night, singing our favorite tune? Remember snowball fights in January and water fights in June? I never thought. She stopped again, her hands trembling even more because her throat swallowing. What we all knew was a lump of emotions. Alicia looked up at the crowd, then at her mother, then at her sister, Nancy, laying peacefully. I could feel the churning in my stomach, that feeling the same one I had the day before at Mr. Jameson's funeral. Alicia continued, I never thought you would be gone so soon. Her voice gave way to tears, and they rolled down her chocolate cheeks. She folded up a paper into a small square and slipped it into the casket on her way back to her seat, where her mother wrapped up her in the love she had left. Like the preacher at the mother's service told me, no one could feel the pain like I could. And I was watching Alicia and Miss Knight, that same went for them. No one in the church was hurting as much as they were, and again, I was satisfied. Mr. Ray started walking toward me, signaling me to follow Benny, Robbie, and the other two guys fell in line behind us. Started down the aisle toward the casket. The pastor was giving his final prayer, and the young girl who sang the first song had come back to the microphone to close the funeral with another selection. This time, something upbeat that people could sing along to. This Little Light of Mine. I took my place in between Benny and Robbie again, but now I wasn't as nervous. We all grabbed the metal bar, and I turned my head toward Miss Knight, and her daughter was sitting. They were both singing and wiping the last few tears from their faces. I caught eyes with the bottom of them and smiled. Miss Knight smiled back. Then Robbie elbowed me in the arm. It was time to go. On Miss Ray's cue. We lifted and turned and slowly marched Nancy with all of her friends and her family singing into the sunlight. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Chapter 4. In this chapter, I think it's based around how funerals help cope with the loss of his own mother, because he knows the people feel the same pain he does, just like his dad copes with her death with alcohol. I think these are both normal things to do. When losing someone, you have so many emotions all at once, you need something to help cope with.